And picking up right from where we left off in the last one, let's jump in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go back into the shell again, and I'm going to do these imports that are right here on pythonrequest.org in the authentication section. It's really simple, so we're going to import requests, and we're going to import from requests underscore OAuth lib, we're going to import OAuth 1. So this is going to be our OAuth authentication stuff. So we actually need our credentials, or these four things here, and I'm going to paste these in. Now, if we look at what's on the documentation, we see a few different things here. We see your app key, your app secret, and then user OAuth token and user OAuth token secret. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, or maybe a little hard to understand how this OAuth stuff works. So this is how I'm going to say it. The consumer key and consumer secret are related to your application itself. The token and token secret are related to you as a user. So if you look at what you see here is we have the Twitter API. This is going to be your Twitter API app, and this stuff is going to be coming from your Twitter user, right? So when a user authenticates with Twitter, you can get these tokens, these two tokens, and you can use that for OAuth 2. So I'm not actually going to be going into the Twitter one itself, but that's essentially what's going on here. So you have your actual app keys, those are these two things, and then you'd have a user related key, those are these two things, and the APIs are here. So these are the app keys, and these are the actual tokens that you would be using for the user. All right, so now let's go ahead and go back into our code, and we're going to write out this OAuth stuff. So I'm going to come in here and say auth equals to, and we're going to do OAuth 1. I want to actually import this OAuth 1 stuff first. So let me import it just like that. I'm going to go ahead and paste that OAuth 1 just like this. And again, we can use the documentation in authentication to do what we need. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that just to make it a little bit easier on us. I do this all the time. I'll copy what's on the code as itself and just work off of that. All right, so we've got our app key. We said we're going to use that as our consumer key. And then our app secret, we're going to use that as our consumer secret. And then token, we're going to use OAuth token and so on. And of course, if these things weren't working for some reason, but the keys right here were correct, you could always change the order. More than likely, the APIs will always have something that says token secret and consumer secret, where the other one might say key. This one might say token key. I don't know if it'd ever say that, or it might just say key, but there's likely going to be clearly one that's a key and clearly one that's the secret. Okay, so there we go. We now have this auth here. So I can actually pass in auth equaling to auth. And I'm just going to go ahead and print out our.text. Okay, so now we've got our authentication stuff. We got all these things, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to paste it into my terminal, and there we go. I actually get some data back that's coming through. So I actually want to work with this data in a little bit of a better way, but before I do that, I'm gonna actually show you one other way to do parameters. So right here we have it where the parameters are actually in the request itself. I can actually get rid of that, so cut all of those out, and we can make a dictionary now of parameters. So I'll just say params equals to a dictionary, and we'll say term, and we're going to put that equal to food, and then we'll say location, and we're going to put that equal to Newport Beach, where I am. Okay, so notice it's a Python dictionary here, and then all we do is add it into params here. So now my parameters is just a dictionary instead of having in the URL, which makes it nice because then it really cleans up how you're looking at it. And then Python request handles everything else for us. If we look back at the actual search documentation, let's make sure that we have the right parameters in of itself. So we do. So general search parameters, we have term, and we also had location, which is not in the general search ones, but we do know it is one by this right here. So you could even just put the location directly on the URL, and it looks like there's a lot of other location parameters as we see here. So that's something else that you can use. Where it says location equals to location, that's what this is holding. If you did latitude and longitude, you could do it like this, but basically you would put it in here as CLL, and then the actual latitude and longitude, which it has an example down here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that. So that's how you would be able to do that right there. I'm going to leave that commented out. That is if you had latitude and longitude, which is something you might, but there's our parameters, and we could do this again. Let's copy and paste everything, or at least the URL and parameters. Print the text out, we get some stuff. Cool. So now what I want to do is actually create a function that does pretty much all this stuff for me. So I'm going to make my own function, and I'll call it do search. Not a big deal here, and I'm going to set my own term, and I'll just say food, and then I'll set my own location, and I'm going to say Newport Beach. So I'm just setting some defaults for keyword arguments here. Hopefully you remember this stuff from earlier in our 30 days of Python, but if you don't, that's what that is. So we're going to set our base URL inside of here, and then what we're going to do is do term equals to term.replace. I'm going to show you two ways on how to do this, and we're replacing spaces with that plus. And I'm going to explain this in just a second. And then we'll do location equals to location.replace. And again, spaces with that plus. And then we're going to do the final URL. And we're going to set it equal to the base URL. And then question mark term. And term. We're just doing some string substitution here. Put that equals to the ampersand. And location equals to again, the curly brackets of location, and let's add format, and then we do base URL equals to base URL, term equals to term, and location equals to location. Okay, so let's go ahead and just space these out a little bit differently. Okay, so this is building right here. This all builds the same, it builds one URL request. And that one URL request will turn into something like this. Now, this is just to show you how it's done. And the reason I replaced spaces with a plus is because that is the pattern that seems to be happening in their URL. It's possible that it would do other things here, URL encoded spaces, as in it's possible that the space would turn into %20. If you don't know what that means, it's not a big deal. But the main thing here is to kind of match what they're doing right here. But again, like I said, with this, that's how we actually can go about doing it. We can actually use a dictionary, and Python requests will do all of this stuff for us. So let's get rid of that. Keep the base URL, but get rid of the other three things here. Just wanted to show you another way on how you can perform your URL request. And I'll explain another reason why params is better in just a moment. So we'll do our parameters again. And we're going to put that equal to an empty dictionary, or excuse me, not an empty dictionary, but a dictionary with term. And this is going to be equal to the term, the keyword argument that's coming through here. And then location is also equal to location of the keyword argument. Make sure these are all in quotes. And now we're going to do that same sort of request. Let's also put the authentication stuff inside of, or just the actual doing of authentication down here. The keys can stay where they are. All right, so now we've got this request, and we can return R. Okay, so now if I wanted to do this, I would just say, well, I can do r.json, and this will actually return JSON data that I can work with in Python. We'll see what that means in just a second. Okay, so there's another advantage to using params in this way versus using a URL. Because if for some reason the API ever changed and you needed to do something like post, the params is already set up and ready for that. So these would be passed in, or could be passed in as additional parameters to that post call, or you could just simply change it to data if you wanted to pass it in as data. That's just another little quick thing that you might actually end up doing when you're using APIs otherwise. But we're using just a GET request, so we can just keep it as this. Now, this JSON data is something that we want to work with, right? We want to work with the data that's actually coming through from Yelp. So that's what we want to do here. And the reason I made this function is to make it easier for us to do our searches. So let's go ahead and try one. And I'll say AB, or let's just say search1 equals to do search. That's going to do a search for us. And then we actually get some data back in here. So what I'm going to do here is I'll just say for I in search1. I'll print out I. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy everything that's on this page here. Well, we actually don't need all of this stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these now because I no longer need them. So I'm going to get rid of those, and everything else should be defined just fine. We go ahead and copy everything now, go back into our terminal and paste it all in. Notice once I went to print out everything, I get 3 different things here. The reason for this is because we're getting JSON data back. So instead of just jumping right into that print, let's go ahead and print out search 1. And we can just go ahead and paste it in here. And notice that it is a dictionary, and there's a lot of data in here that's coming through. But if I scroll to the top of it, I see that there's something called region. So that's a key, and the value is the region, the actual location that it is. And then if you go further, you'll probably see something called businesses. I'm not going to go through this data specifically because I know what to expect. And also, that would be written somewhere in here as far as the request is concerned. And you can play around with the API console to actually see the different responses in a much prettier manner. And as we see here, we got region, total, and businesses. So those are the 3 keys that we see, but those keys I already printed out, right? So I actually showed you that I printed out those keys right here. So what that means is I can use this as another one, so we can actually iterate through the businesses that are there. And we can do this very simply. Copy that out, go into the terminal, we print it out, and we get all the dictionaries that are related to any given business. Again, you can see these dictionaries and their values in here, but I'm just going to jump right into getting the actual data. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it so you guys can just see the final data, which is the same data that we were getting before, or similar data. So if I go ahead and go through in here and just do it this way, I'm going to paste it in, and now I get all of that data. I've got my address, I got a phone number, I got a business name, and a city, and so on. Right? So if you go through all of this, you can actually see location and then display address. So if I look on this, it says location, display address. So those are the key value pairs that are working there. That's just playing around with dictionaries. And what this does is turns it into this line right here, turns it into a Python dictionary that we can work with. And that's where I can play with all this stuff. Now, if you're not sure that something exists in this dictionary, you can just do this i.get. So any dictionary.get will allow it to be none. All right, so let's see what I mean by that if I just printed out something in search 1. So let's say I print out search 1 underscore 1, and then I want to get the key of some random key. And I use it using the brackets and press enter. It gives me this key error. Now, if I change that key into a get call, so the get method or get function, and press enter, it just says none. It's really nice. It just removes the potential for error. And that way you can do stuff like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and print out not just the phone number, but I also want to do .get, and let's go ahead and get the website. And then I can just kind of play around with the API itself, and that might give me the actual website. And notice that I get a lot of them saying none. So I can do a quick search inside of here and look for website. Doesn't look like I'm getting any. That's okay. I just don't have any as far as what this is concerned, or I just don't have the correct URL for it. So if I look for URL, I can probably find just different URL things, so such as image URL. So that's another one that we could probably potentially use. We could print out i.get and image URL, and again, paste all of those things in. And we got the image URL there, so you could open that up and save it. A lot of stuff you could do. So it's a lot of things to cover. We definitely did all of the sort of stuff that we did scraping data on our own, but this time we used an API instead. That API returns back JSON data, which is JavaScript, basically JavaScript arrays and or lists as well as dictionaries. And then this right here turns it into a Python dictionary that we can work with in Python, and then we can get all of our data here like we see right here. If you have any questions on this stuff, let us know. Otherwise, we will see you in the next one.